Yeah. So Jake, thanks for reaching out. I appreciate you. Again, was it? I guess you sent me on Twitter. Sent me on Twitter was when you DM'd me on Twitter, and thanks for reaching out. And I'm glad we got this to happen. And for everyone there, since Jake's got a lot of questions, and he and I are going to be talking, we're going in emote only mode because our focus on this stream is not going back and forth with chat. Although I love to do that when I stream, but I think Jake and I'll have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully gonna be a lengthy conversation. I just want to check one thing though. I know it's an emote only. Is there a way to like double check audio and everything is just fine and dandy with everyone who's watching?
I know that I think I have folks that are watching and they would have pinged me if for any reason audio wasn't good. So
awesome. Well, let's get right into it. In case I know that the chatters know who you are, the new Twitch CEO, that being Dan Clancy, but I think people also are very curious about your background. So I first wanted to kick things off and get a bit of a preface on you before you even got to Twitch.
Yeah.
What's your background?
Yeah. So in terms of background, and I've talked about this some because we all end up making choices in our lives at different stages, and then people see you as whatever is that last choice that you made, and they kind of, I think we put people in boxes because we try to think of the world in this very kind of linear fashion. And so most of my career has been in the tech space, but if I go back in time, I actually in high school and college I was a theater and computer science major, and people used to look at the intersection of those two things, and I was like, no, I just have two different interests. And then I went, the job I thought about doing theater or directing, but then I ended up, using my computer science degree, worked for a while, went to University of Texas in Austin where I got my PhD in AI. Then I worked at NASA for a while, managing a lot of their AI and robotics stuff. I went to Google 9 years. I was at YouTube. I ran product and engineering there about 10 years ago, which I think is highly relevant as I think about the evolution of this space. I actually was there when we started YouTube Live. I was responsible for product and engineering, and in fact, and the story we can get to, you can ask me the story about how we almost acquired Justin TV, which is an interesting story.
Okay.
Put that on your list. But and then I went to Nextdoor, where I was running product and engineering. Then I came to Twitch about almost 5 years ago now. Not 5 years, 4 years ago now. And but in all my roles, I come from a technical background, but I've often been playing many different roles that combines kind of product and strategy and everything else. And one thing I say is I think Twitch is kind of this penultimate of my two interests when I started out, because I think there's a different world where I would have loved being a creator. It's just wonderful what they all do, and the role I have is like special. I love it because we're a platform that helps all these creators create all sorts of stuff.
And so when did you first find yourself at Twitch? How many years back now?
That was a little less than 4 years ago.
Okay. Yep. And so Twitch president?
So when I came to Twitch, I was running product and engineering. And then I included the go-to-market and most of the organization. I was doing that about a year and some change before Emmett decided to hang up the gloves.
So how does that conversation come about where you decide, okay, I'm going to take the reins as Twitch CEO? Keep in mind, you're coming into the Twitch CEO role during a pretty, I would say, tough time to be the face of Twitch. How does that come about?
Well, it started, Emmett reached out and he talked about, his life and where he was in his life. And this was about, 6 months before the announcement came out, because he had just found out he was going to be a father. This had been basically his professional life. We, worked very closely together. And that's when he reached out and said, look, Dan, I'm thinking it's time for me to, go and do another chapter. And at that point, it was sort of obvious that if he was going to move on, because I had been running it with him, that, that he'd want me to step into those shoes. And I do think, so we talked about it, and it wasn't until about 6 months later till it became public, because he basically was waiting until he had his child, and that's when he wanted to make the transition.
Gotcha. How has being the Twitch CEO been for you so far? Has it been all you expected? Has it been harder? Has it been easier? What's the experience been like?
It's probably fair to say the answer is yes. It's been harder. It's been easier. It's been happier. It's been all those things. But the way I describe it is, people obviously are very passionate about Twitch because I think Twitch matters in their lives. It's made a difference in so many people's lives, and they care deeply about what we do, and so therefore they have high expectations for us. And one of the challenges is people don't necessarily really know me. They characterize me based upon what somebody else might say. And so that's one thing that I've been doing, is spending time with streamers. As I think I've been streaming myself. That's why we're doing it on my channel. I've really enjoyed that. I feel a great deal of responsibility in the role because of how much Twitch matters to these people's lives, because I think Twitch is very unique. And, when there are changes in other platforms, they don't care as much about Twitch because Twitch really matters to them. And so it's certainly got lots of challenges, but in a nugget, it's been a blast.
And one of the reasons we took this interview at first, and I appreciate you doing so, because you open yourself up to a whole new light of things, given the internet as it is, right? People, we've seen all your clips, even just from your regular streams, all over LSF and such. But cutting to the chase, we got some harder questions, given some recent Twitch updates that a lot of people have been very outspoken about. So when it comes to the branded content policy update that you guys had released now a couple weeks back, and then had pulled it back after releasing it, can you go into some detail about what the thought process was when that was first put out? I'm sure it wasn't a last second choice to just push it out. Probably a lot of time and effort went into it. And then why pull it back so immediately after public backlash? Can you just kind of...
Yeah. Interestingly, it's something that the discussions about it and reviewing the policy had actually happened a long time before it went out. It was before I was CEO. I was still obviously involved, but literally a year to a year and a half was when we'd had the discussions, and then there was engineering work. And in terms of what ended up going out and what we were intending, the two things weren't the same. Because in fact, what we're really focused on is what most people would call, the way I describe this is, the focus was on most people would call advertising versus sponsorship. And the thing that was unfortunate about our mistake here is, I think sponsorships is like incredibly strategic for Twitch and incredibly important, because for our streamers, they make a significant amount of revenue through sponsorships. And that is one reason that helps Twitch, because Twitch gives them relevance and Twitch helps them get these sponsorships. I won't go through the details of how it happened, but there were some changes, and as we looked at the wording afterwards, it was clear that the wording that was released was not our intent. Our focus was more on advertising. I think the reaction was strong, and I understand why the reaction was strong, because there was some language that we should have had in there to clarify. It's always tricky whenever you describe something, because you see something so often and you have something in your mind because that's what you're thinking. And then you read it and it's consistent with what you have in your mind. And so that's why we pulled it back so quickly, because the interpretation that was out there was not what we were targeting. And so we wanted to be just clear, surgical, to the point, and pull it back right away.
And I think, at least for me in recent memory, that was one of the most misconstrued, and like you said, the reaction was far from what you guys probably expected. This is one of those Twitch updates that was so misunderstood or misrepresented by Twitch, in my opinion, and hence the walk back right away. A common question was, are you guys going to be enacting some sort of, whether it be you have some ambassadors or a group that you guys shoot these ideas off that are more close to the community, or what have you guys learned ever since releasing that update and having to walk it back due to such severe backlash? 24, 48 hours later.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is, there was, as always, when something goes wrong, I talked about how I worked at NASA, and I actually was at NASA during the Columbia accident, which of course these two have nothing really in common. But whenever something goes wrong, often it's like 3 or 4 things went wrong at once. Right. And in terms of us getting this out. So some of the things we had already been doing but didn't happen there was in terms of engaging with our ambassadors and other people to get feedback early. They actually had gotten some feedback, but it was on an earlier version. And to be honest, I don't think they got the right feedback from the right people, because they read it differently than how everyone else was reading it. So we absolutely are looking at the processes by which we got feedback, how we review things, and also how we bring things out. I think you've seen we've actually made a change even in the Delta. That in fact, one thing that we changed was making sure that as we release things, and we've done that this week, is we go on stream right away to answer questions and be upfront rather than just writing something and putting it out there. So lots of changes that we're looking at to kind of make sure that that thing doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and I was going to let you reiterate that too, because a follow-up being that, ever since that update and having to walk it back, you guys have at the very least enacted, now you release these updates and you yourself are going live. But again, a lot of people wondering, with this maybe lack of transparency or so many of these messages to get misconstrued on this pipeline, what are you guys doing to try and avoid that difference between what you guys think an announcement is going to receive and how it actually is received?
Yeah, so it's honing it over and over again. So in fact, we absolutely, in the announcements we just went out, and I don't want to go through the specific things, but we rolled them out with people in advance. The other thing that happens is sometimes we would go out and describe what we're doing. Now we're also doing things where we have what I'll call fresh eyes, where you have somebody read what we put out there. Okay, not hear what we describe it, but all they know about is they read what we are releasing. And then we ask them, what do you read into this, as opposed to hearing us describe it? Because the written word, sometimes we hear it one way, but they hear it differently. So we're both getting structured feedback from multiple sources, and then we're really pushing to hone the message. We did that with the content classification, where we identified key misunderstandings that might occur and concerns. So that way, when we went live, and we even changed the blog post, for example, to be absolutely clear with content classification that you will never get a strike for not labeling things right. And we needed to write that in bold, black and white to make sure everyone understood it. So part of it is getting the feedback and then honing the messaging so that it's very clear, especially what I'll call the kind of hot questions and the sensitive points.
Yeah, speaking of hot questions, I promise you we'll get to some more easier and probably fast fire questions later on. But top of the bat, you got to talk about the most talked about points, given the most recent updates on Twitch. So branded content policy, everyone had their words on. I think multicasting and simulcasting is the next hot topic, as we've seen so many creators asking why Twitch is not willing to walk that back and allow simulcasting. Can you speak more as to why Twitch is not going to let streamers do that?
Yeah, so first of all, let me go, because sometimes we'll take that simulcasting in isolation of where the decision that was made in. So as many people know, it used to be that our partner contracts had an exclusivity clause in them. And I don't know how much you know about that, Jake, but our partner contract was such that it has an exclusivity clause, and the partner contracts were for a year. Okay. And we took that out of the partner contract. And I was the one who pushed hard on that, because I did not feel like exclusivity was the right way to approach the market. It limited our streamers in terms of what they can do. Now, we had always had a simulcasting provision in the affiliate agreement. But in the partner agreement, since they precluded from ever streaming on another platform, then you didn't even talk about simulcasting. So we pulled back, we eliminated exclusivity because we thought that was the right thing for our streamers. And then we further, when we talked about the simulcasting provision that had always been there, we were explicit about TikTok and Instagram and other mobile platforms that it wasn't a problem. I think it's one of these things that I think we always need to look at it to see in the end what's the right thing for the community. I do think there's a lot of value in having people focus on their community on Twitch. Right? A big part about is the fact that the streamer is controlling chat, focusing on their community. But this is one of those things that we're always looking at, because ultimately we want to figure out what's the right experience. So, it was a significant movement to get rid of the exclusivity and to get rid of the limitations on simulcasting on some platforms. And we're going to keep looking at it in terms of more broadly.
Yeah, because I feel like we're in a time of streaming right now, as a lot of these platforms, I think Twitch included would be fair to say, are kind of walking away from these big streamer contracts, right? So you have people like Ninja who are willing to drop his partner/affiliate from Twitch for the time being and multicast on not just mobile platforms, but he was simulcasting on Twitch and
Yep.
YouTube, Facebook. You throw Kick in there. And so when this was announced, you have someone like Ninja calling out Twitch. Was he?
No, he was not. He was not in
the reason.
He was not the reason. In fact, we hadn't contacted him. In fact, since then we've reached out, and we had moved it to the TOS over the contract just because we felt it belonged in the TOS. Ninja is very unique in this space. He has a long history in this space, and so at the time we were not concerned about what Ninja was doing. I know we've reached out to him. I don't know if he's changed, because I know for a while he didn't simulcast on Twitch. I know we had folks reach out to him, but it was not directed at him at all.
Yeah, because you have people like him who say, there might be, right? This is all speculative. There might be some sort of, tremendous change in the streaming space where you open up all platforms, kind of a rising tides like angle. I can only assume what someone like Ninja is thinking in this case, where if he is allowed to actually stream on Twitch as well, you guys already allow the TikTok and Instagrams of the world to be simulcasted too, but then you also add in YouTube and Kick and Facebook. I think, I'm only presuming what his angle would be, is if Twitch really thinks that they are the best streaming platform, if you discover Ninja on one of those other platforms, then you might go, oh, like if I want to watch him live, maybe I can do that back on Twitch.
Yep.
Would maybe be the angle. So I think people are wondering, though, what is the specific reason as to not allow even people who are not partners or affiliates on Twitch to simulcast elsewhere when you allow it on mobile platforms, but not on platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Kick specifically?
Right. So again, this is mostly about, as opposed to it being a contract, we were cleaning up our contract with things that should be in the contract versus the TOS. Okay. And I think this is one of those things that should be in the TOS. There's a question about how we, what we're doing to detect or enforce things. And small streamers that are pre-affiliate, I love for them to be exploring and figuring out how they can, grow their audiences and build their platform. So this is something, as I said, that I personally am always keeping an eye on what's the right thing. You described about this idea that it's a good way to grow your audience. I think that absolutely could be the case. I do think there is value in focusing on your community. But I think, everything you said about things for us to keep an eye on. And, the thing I'll highlight is, again, the removing exclusivity. A lot of what we see right now is in part because we removed exclusivity because I think it was the right thing to do to try and open up the space. Right. And I think that was a big move to try and say more people in the space is good for the live streaming space. One thing, and I'll talk about this later, our challenge, and I think this is one of the problems with possibly how we approached this before, the challenge is the live streaming space isn't as big as any of us want it to be. I think live streaming is something that's very special, and ultimately we need to try and grow the pie.
Gotcha. We took community questions too, so some of these are going to be faster than others. When big streamers leave Twitch, and a lot of big streamers have not left Twitch, as I'm sure you're aware, they've done so non-exclusively. But when big streamers even leave Twitch to try out these other platforms, what's the thought process from Twitch? Are you guys bugged by this? Are you open to it? When someone like that explores those options, what are you guys thinking?
Of course, these are people that built their careers on Twitch. Okay, and so we can talk about the most obvious one in terms of Felix and XQC. And these are people that have done a lot for Twitch. And so if you ask me about Felix, I'd say I'm excited for Felix. If you look at the situation he's in, he's getting to do stuff there that, in our policies, we're not letting him do. And so it gives him the flexibility and the freedom to explore like his own creative expression. I know I won't say which streamer. I was talking to one streamer that was talking about doing something on YouTube in terms of a wrestling match or something, where it's like, yes, you should be able to explore and figure out what's the right platform for the right things. And so, of course, whenever somebody big leaves, there's a lot of press and all that. But my real belief is that, there are tons of streamers out there. And as they explore and try different platforms, good for them.
So with all of these big streamers, at least experimenting, right? And I think it is best for the industry. There's mostly drama going on between these platforms, but I think it is at the end of the day. It's really cool to see these competitors because everyone makes everyone a tiny bit better, no matter what people's opinions are at the end of the day. But do you think Twitch is still the most attractive place to come to stream?
I do. I know that's going to shock you there, Jake, but I do. And
You know I had to. Come on now.
whoop, hold on. I just hit the screen. Uh-oh.
Oh, shoot.
Jake? Can you hear me?
I can still hear you. Can you still hear me?
I hear you fine. The problem is, it's the monitor. It was just the monitor. I don't know what happened. So,
good.
It was not anything on. I have two monitors up, and I think I kicked the cord that was going to one of the monitors.
Keep your feet calm.
Yeah, I know. So, we've been in this for a long time. There have been other competitors enter the market. Our sole focus is on live streaming. That is what we do. That is what we've always done. And I think as a place that focuses on the streamer and provides those streamers an ability to build their communities, the communities that exist today, there are millions of communities on Twitch, and they're big, they're small, they're of all sizes. We have to focus on a lot of issues such as safety and moderation and community health. That's critical for a lot of streamers. I think we understand a lot of aspects. I think live streaming is a challenge for creators, and it's a challenge for building a platform that works. So in terms of one that's focused on our streamers, I understand we have to earn their trust, but I still feel very good about us being the best place in the home for live streaming.
Who do you think is the biggest competitor to Twitch right now in the marketplace?
I'm not going to pick one. That's because they each have different pieces, right? They're different slithers. They're focusing on different aspects. And I guess I would go back to the point that I said in terms of one of the mistakes I think sometimes you can do is you focus on your competition more so than on your customer. Okay, and our focus really needs to be on our streamers. And if we're not doing something right, and a streamer decides to do something else, well, then that puts pressure on us to innovate. And you said it. I think you said it well. Where ultimately innovation is the thing that's going to drive the live streaming market. I think the live streaming market is much smaller than what it will be and what it should be.
Interesting. So speaking of providing for streamers, you have previously said that, Twitch, part of your job is to give these streamers a stage.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you've also been streaming on Twitch. So after your short time doing so, what do you think that Twitch needs to provide you to turn this hobby into potentially a viable career? Beyond just the stage, what do you think Twitch as a platform needs to offer their streamers?
Yeah. So first of all, the number one challenge for any streamer is discovery. Right? They all want to grow their audience. They all want to grow their communities. Now, one of the challenges, you talk about the description I used. One of the challenges with long form is that discovery works better with short form content. So if you talk to someone and ask them, I'll ask you, Jake, if you use TikTok, how many creators do you see in a week on TikTok? Do you use TikTok?
I try and avoid it, man, but the few times I use it, I see dozens, if not more than that.
So most people who use TikTok might be exposed to 1,000 creators in a week or more.
Yeah.
Right? If someone uses Twitch regularly, they may be exposed to 8 to 12 to 15 in a week. Okay? Same thing if you talk about your use of YouTube in terms of all the VODs. I'm talking about YouTube VODs, right? You see all sorts of stuff. And in general, short form is better in terms of seeing a lot of different people. And so that's one reason why TikTok is so powerful. For me, the magic of Twitch is that we drive the viewers to your community. In fact, the reason the community is so strong on Twitch is because people stay there. They hang out for a long time. And so I very much realize this on my platform where I see the same people when I stream over and over again. So I think it remains a challenge for us to help people grow their audience. I think we need to do that both on our platform and by helping them create content for other platforms. So we recently released the very early version of a clips editor, and I know I've been using it, and for everything I like about it, there are like 10 features that I want in it. Because really what I want to be able to do is take my clips and in all about 5 minutes, create a post for a short form social media post. And right now I can do that, but it doesn't have all the features that I would want in terms of creating a great post for short form social media. Okay, so that's allowing our creators to quickly create content from their Twitch stream. We're going to be doing work in terms of clips, in terms of a clips viewer. Lots of creators have been asking for this. We've talked about this some. We're launching products so that way you can create more short form content, and that helps in terms of your discovery on Twitch. But our focus isn't just discovery on Twitch, because the point is ultimately you want to be discovered, and we want to make it better on Twitch as well as better on other platforms, because some of these other platforms are more designed for that. The big thing we're incredibly clear on is our core focus will always be what I call community-based live streaming, meaning we may create short-form content. We're not trying to be TikTok. We're not going to be TikTok. It's a different experience. The thing that works for Twitch is when we have people spending time in your communities.
So it's probably a quicker question. Clips for you page or searchable clips, are these all things that Twitch is trying to figure out? I think a lot of people, when it comes to discoverability as a larger angle, clips is a huge thing on Twitch that other third-party sites are taking advantage of. So for you page, searchable clips, are those?
Yes, I mean, you describe, as always with this, what you need to do is experiment. We're starting on mobile. We're going to talk about this some at TwitchCon in Paris in more detail, but we're starting on mobile because mobile is a place where people have a little bit of time. So both things you just talked about is what's a way that we can help our creators use their clips better, and what's the right thing. That's all going to come by trying different things out and seeing what works.
Okay. I think from public perception, a lot of these recent updates almost make it seem, and again, this is a tough time for the tech industry. It's a tough time for everyone right now with the number of layoffs going across many companies. But there are other decisions that Twitch has made that might have people thinking that Twitch is really trying to make money right now. Is Amazon have a say in that, or are they trying to make money with Twitch right now in this moment, or where are some of these decisions really coming from?
Yeah. So as leaders of Twitch, we have a responsibility to make sure we run the company so that we're here for a long time, because there are tons of people whose lives depend upon Twitch. We certainly are trying to think about how do we run this company for a long time. I'll say emphatically, I feel very good about where we are right now in terms of the long-term sustainability of the business. And that's really thinking about how do we stick in this.
Gotcha. And again, that's something that's really hit a lot of people. This is probably going to be one of the last heavy-hitting questions, but again, we have so many submitted from the audience. And again, really quickly, I want to take the time to thank chat and everyone for tuning in, because credit where it's due. We haven't seen this in the past few years of Twitch. I know that there's a lot of fire and flames on the internet right now, but not a lot of CEOs of stream platforms are willing to have these one-on-one discussions where possibly hard questions can be asked. So I really do appreciate that. I hope people at the end of the day can appreciate that. When it came time for this most recent update, you guys have been launching a lot.
I know.
So we're talking about the Twitch Partner Plus program.
Yep.
And so this is essentially giving back the 70-30 split to streamers, kind of in a sense.
Yes.
I think a lot of people took this update and they kind of analyzed it. I know Streams Charts and others have had their take on this about maybe a minuscule percentage of actual partnered streamers that this update does impact. So what was the thought process behind releasing that as giving the 70-30 back?
Yeah, the interesting thing is if you place this in context, if you go back to the earlier decision, right, and the earlier announcement in terms of Premium EULA. So first, let me answer the question you just asked, okay? Roughly, in terms of streamers that are either in what was previously called the Premium EULA program, the premium program, or in this new program, it's about 15% of partners are in one of those two buckets. Okay, so that gives you a rough sense in terms of how many streamers are benefiting from that. If you go back in time, the old program was something where we weren't public about the criteria. Okay, we didn't actually have a rigid criteria. It was, well, you could ask for it. And I think that was always a challenge, and we weren't transparent about a lot of it. As we've said, we actually had stopped offering those deals about a year and a half before the announcement. Okay, and in fact, some streamers knew that. They knew, oh yeah, I asked, and we said, but we had never come out and told people that. So the interesting thing is when I made that announcement, 9 months ago, really what I was doing was announcing something that had happened a year and a half before in terms of offering them. So when we started with this program, part of this was trying to come up with something that we felt like could benefit those streamers that are they've probably gone full time. They're trying to make their life as a creator. We had a certain amount of resources. I fully appreciate that there are a lot of streamers out there that are working very hard, and that in fact I understand completely that streamers would like us to be able to provide 70/30 more broadly. This is a start, is the way I describe it. The criteria we tried to make it lower than what it had previously been on the earlier program. And so part of this idea was trying to extend this benefit in a structured manner so that people knew exactly what the criteria was. And then right when they qualified, they got the money right away. So the way I describe it is a start. I'd love to keep seeing how we can benefit streamers across the spectrum.
And for benefiting streamers across the spectrum, I think a lot of people eyed this update and then they saw the percentage of partners actually impacted. And so it led to a ton of people, I would say a vocal majority, saying, okay, why can Twitch just not give everyone who streams on their platform as a partner 70/30 split?
Yeah. I mean, this goes to this point about understanding the details of the business. And of course, this doesn't satisfy someone who's working hard streaming, and they would like to get more, and I fully appreciate that. There are lots of parts of how people monetize from Twitch. Prime is a big benefit that many of our creators get, and it's a significant benefit for many of our creators that is not part of that one number. And so right now, as we look at where we're at, we couldn't extend it to everybody, but we're continuing to look to see how we can make improvements so that way we can continue to lower threshold and expand this so more people can benefit.
Okay. And I asked you earlier when we talk about your personal stream, but when it comes to perspective of other streamers out there, what do you think are the biggest incentives that Twitch offers for streamers to be on their platform as opposed to everywhere else? If you could just list out, why would people want to be on Twitch, not somewhere else?
So I'll state when I talk to streamers and I ask them this question, the ones that are on Twitch, okay? The first thing they always say, the community is special on Twitch. The community is different on Twitch. And for those creators that come to Twitch, and I don't think that's by chance that the community is special on Twitch. I think there are aspects in our product that keep people on the page that are not the same on other platforms. Safety and is a big part. I was just talking to streamers at a partner dinner last night, and they were talking about the mod tools, and they were talking about some of the other platforms and their ability to control moderation and control what happens in chat. I think in terms of monetization, there's a lot of focus on the revenue share split, but really when you think about monetization, there are really three parts of monetization on Twitch. One is the subscriptions, and the gift subs work really well on Twitch in terms of turning eyeballs into dollars. And so we're effective at generating patronage for that. I think advertising is an important part for many streamers, okay, and then also sponsorship. And sponsorship really comes from your reach, and the sponsorship is direct to a creator. That it's all about relevance, and that's why you see some streamers actually, as they try other platforms, it's still important for them to stay on Twitch because Twitch is how they get their relevance. Twitch is where their community is, and as you look overall, you have to look at how are they going to make their living. And between our subscription products, our ads products, combined with sponsorship, you put it all together, and I still feel very good that in terms of the best place for them to make a living.
And so you said all these things about Twitch, being the best streaming platform to be on right now. I would say yes, it still maintains its spot as the #1 streaming platform. You list all the incentives it has that other sites maybe don't. But I think the general audience, they see the updates that Twitch has made, to increase monetization, whether it's through increase of ads, keeping heavier splits than some other platforms out there, the unfortunate layoffs that, yes, many companies have had to endure. Then you have the branded content policy update that was launched and then walked back, which has people rightfully concerned about potentially the profitability of Twitch or being able to maintain their staying power in the space.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's concerned after seeing these updates, I mean, You
How do
said
you talk about it?
you're not concerned, but I feel like some of the updates have people thinking the opposite.
Well, let me restate. When you said I'm not concerned, I'm always like, when the audience is frustrated with it, of course I hear that, and that that speaks to us because we care about the streamers. So I'm not saying I'm not concerned. I'm saying actually we definitely are concerned when our streamers are not feeling like we're doing what they need. Let me tease apart one thing you said that's important because it's often lost in this. When we, one of the things we did recently was with the ads incentive program was we increased the ads rev share. And that change actually was a significant change into how much money creators made from ads. From the $3.50 or $5 CPM into the same rev share split that YouTube uses on ads in terms of 55% of net. And that moved a fair amount of money out into the creators' pockets that previously we hadn't been putting in the creators' pockets. And so, as you list the things, I think that's one thing that is often missed, that in fact we these things piece together, because ultimately we think that we need to be thinking about at different stages. There are different ways that you make money. And for our big streamers, in terms of the AIP program, they're doing a lot better because of the increased revenue share split.
When we speak of splits, Kick has been often talked about, rival platform, with some incredible splits. Again, there's obviously a counter argument to all of this, right? The sustainability of all. So when you hear these talks of another platform like Kick offering 95/5 splits for people to come on over, and you've seen their business model, do you think something like that is sustainable given how Twitch already, I wouldn't say struggles, but Twitch is, it's a hard time to combat in this kind of market?
Yeah, so, I want to be careful about commenting on one or another competitor in terms of their specific situation. I think you highlighted some things, and I think that's the sort of topic that is good for other people to talk on, because I do think, as I said, often on this idea that us talking about them or vice versa, I think our job is to focus on what we're doing and not to think through their particular situation.
Understood. Running Twitch, you said when you join, it's harder than you thought. It's easier than it thought. It's all of the above. It's a mix mash of emotions, and you put yourself in this brand new light. So, what's the hardest part about running Twitch?
So, interestingly, I'll say this is, when you say the hardest part, it's the hardest part and it's the best part. The hardest part and the best part is it absolutely affects me when people are unhappy. And one of the biggest differences for me in terms of stepping in the role was, before I'd be making a lot of decisions, but I was doing it with Emmett. In the end, I might push on this or that, but Emmett was the CEO and I was trying to implement Emmett's visions. Now, anything we do, I often say this statement, I don't make every decision at Twitch, because it wouldn't make sense for me to make every decision at Twitch. But at some level, I'm responsible for every decision that is made by Twitch. And since we matter so much in creators' lives, that certainly there's a weight to that. But that weight is both the thing that makes it so special, but also makes it challenging, that you have to balance that emotion, because I do care about what people are feeling and what people are saying.
And this might be before your time as CEO, but probably ongoing during it. And I got to preface, throughout this whole process, this can't be an easy ship to operate when you have thousands upon thousands of streamers. Something always entangled in the news is Twitch bans. And I feel like for a long time there, and maybe still for a lot of people out there, the public perception would be that Twitch has been pretty inconsistent with some of their bans in the past. Can you speak as to why that might be the case, or why it is so difficult to track case-by-case bans? Because I think if we really wanted to, we could dive back on so many. But then again, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of streamers probably banned on a weekly basis.
Yeah. So I think you highlight one of the things that we need to keep working on. So you talk about consistency. Actually, I think we've done a lot of work over the last 3 years to drive greater consistency. I think it was certainly the case that as you go back in time, we did not have the structure in place to ensure that consistent decisions were being made in all cases. So, for example, we do a lot more now in terms of looking at the decisions that our operators will make and then going through a QA process to make sure and measuring, in fact, to ensure consistency, because you have an operator that's making a decision. And the question is, does this one and this one make the same decision? So I think we spend a lot of time on that. We also had a lot of work to do in clarifying our policies, because it used to be our policies were written very generally. And so you'd read it and be like, okay, I don't know. And so actually the team there has worked a lot. Our community guidelines, if you went back on the Wayback Machine and looked at Twitch's community guidelines 4 years ago versus today, you'll see them much more specific, much more pointing to specific issues of what's happening. I still think we have a ways to go in terms of this. I think when someone is streaming for a long time, sometimes they absolutely have the right intent, and then it creates anxiety because they're worried that they may just trip up. They may step over a line, okay? And that is difficult when you're live streaming. When you're live streaming, things happen. So I think it is both one of our strengths, but I think it is really hard to get this right. I think having community guidelines and having consistently applied community guidelines are really important. But at the same time, you don't want to be banning people that are trying to do the right things and just make a mistake. So it's a balance. I think we've gotten a lot better, but I don't think we're done.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of categories on Twitch, and it seems that some categories get repeated bans more than others. And a lot of these bans be 1 day, 1 day, 1 day, 3 day, 3 day. And maybe some streamers more than others don't ever, get maybe an outright punishment to ultimately change behavior. When I personally look at some categories, right, you look across body painting, hot tubs, swimming pools, ASMR, there's a lot of lines that are rode on both sides. I have to imagine it's very hard to land on what is right and what is wrong. So how does Twitch navigate those kind of sections?
So you used a number of examples and you used the phrase right and wrong, right? And one of the things we do, which is interesting as you think about it, is there's some areas where we have policies because we've determined we don't want that on their site. It doesn't mean it's hurting somebody, okay? And many of the categories you just mentioned, it doesn't hurt somebody, but we've decided we don't want that. And so we've tried to draw a line, and then some people go close to the line because that's what they want to do, and then they're trying to figure out the line. And so sometimes as we think of penalties, it depends upon the severity of the offense. There are other areas such as harassment, especially when you talk about underrepresented groups, women, other groups. And that's very different because then someone is harmed. And so as we think about the severity of the penalty, the offense matters in terms of the severity of the penalty. All offenses are not the same. If you're doing something where you are, going after someone, harassing someone, attacking someone, doing things that can hurt somebody, we treat those very differently than someone that's dancing on a line and steps over that line.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And I think you can see that if you think through some of the, and some people, of course, get worked up over, this line or that line. But I think there's a difference.
There's a hairy line of sexual content on platforms. And I think that streamers continue to push that line on every platform, but Twitch also included. And it seems that the case is we see a lot of these 1 day bans, 3 day bans, and streamers come right back and do the same content. So at what point does that line finally get passed by people who are continuing to?
I think that's always a trick. And one of the challenges when you're streaming is you're going close to the line. If you stream a lot, you're going to step over more. So I think one of the things you have to take into account is you need to have an incentive that tries to get them away from the line, but that they also understand the impact of the harm of what they're doing.
Let me hit you with a little easy one that has been asked a lot. I know that someone like Nadeshot, a lot of streamers though, top streamers have asked about the stream quality on Twitch compared to that of YouTube or other sites. Do you guys have plans to increase the bit rate or help out with the quality of streams in the near future? Yeah.
This is always a tricky one because I'm also a techie and would love to have that. We have a IVS now is part of AWS. We kind of broke off our back end so that, and that's now servicing other other services and other companies. Absolutely looking at ways that for those streamers that want the improved bit rate, that we can do something. There isn't something in particular that I'm, prepared to announce right now.
Gotcha. This is the last big community one that we had, but we have a ton of smaller questions, and I'm sure eventually we can open up to chat as well. But this has definitely been probably the most talked about. Why did Twitch take such a harsh stance against unregulated gambling? And this continues to be a talking point, and I'm sure you already know the platforms we're comparing to here, but Twitch taking that harsh stance has sparked up so many discussions. So why did Twitch choose at that time to take their stance finally against unregulated gambling?
Yeah, this is one of those topics that there were, needless to say, lots of views on this topic in the Twitch community, and lots of views in terms of gambling in general. And so there are people that were, arguing for us to take a harsher stance. I can tell you, as I thought through and looked at it, we decided that these offshore crypto gambling sites that were not regulated in the U.S., that there were some challenges with respect to protections for different people in terms of some of the challenges with gambling. And of course, in terms of gambling sites in the U.S., those regulations put things in place to help protect the users. And of course, a big part about Twitch is a streamer builds a strong emotional affinity with their audience, and their audience can mimic that streamer. And we decided that in terms of these sites that weren't regulated in the major Western countries, that we did not want to be promoting them on Twitch because we didn't feel like that was the right thing for our community. It's not a statement about gambling. That's why we drew this line, as opposed to us making any kind of judgment. Instead, we determined, look, there are people in play. There are organizations in place where their job is to think about this. And we felt like in the major countries where we're operating in, that's where they have the regulations. So it wasn't our job to determine what were the right regulations. Some of those regulations are just ensuring that the odds are consistent. Somebody's making sure that nothing gets changed. And we decided the simplest way was just to say we didn't want that on our site.
Was this something in the works for a long time? I think a lot of the counter argument, we won't get into the niche of between regulated versus unregulated versus crypto versus sports betting versus actual casino gambling. That's just, we don't have time for that. What was the timeline on you guys knowing this? Because it was coincidentally timed with some of the top streamers calling for a ban on gambling. And then we have shortly thereafter the announcement.
Yeah, we actually, those were completely unrelated. And in fact, as some people, when the Partner Plus thing came out, some people thought we did that in reaction, and other people said, no, trust me, Twitch cannot turn something around in 4 days like this. And I can tell you in terms of the policy that we rolled out then, it wasn't in reaction. It had actually been under discussion. We had updated the policy, I think it was like 9 months before then, where at that point we talked about linking out, and we thought that might address the problem. It didn't address the problem. And so we actually... we're having meetings. Before a lot of the, the outrage or the comments came out, we had a doc that I was reviewing that, we reviewed and had a meeting. I think it was a week before any of that even occurred, that was proposing what the policy was. And so we pretty much had been working on that for a little while to try to find what the right line was. Because, of course, a lot of people were talking more broadly about slots or casinos. And I actually feel really good about the line we ended up drawing, because we're not making a statement. There are lots of forms of gambling. There's state lotteries. That's a form of gambling, right? And people do that all the time. They fund education in different parts of the state. So we were very kind of intentional in not trying to go broadly and make any statements about gambling writ large. But it took a while to try to figure out the right balance point. And it wasn't in response. It just happened to come up at the same time.
So the gambling currently on Twitch, that's going to continue to be a thing? Is that mostly because it's regulated in the U.S.?
Mm-hmm. Yes. That, in fact, that is their job. In other words, it's not our job to determine what's okay or not, right? There's all sorts of different types, right? DraftKings, they're a big sponsor of the NBA. So it is certainly the case. Our whole society is at a different place, of course, than if you go back 20 or 30 years. The internet has really led to a lot of evolution in terms of different views on gambling. I may have my personal views. My personal views do not affect what's the right thing for Twitch.
Yeah, just there's so many discussions on gambling because I think people would look at that and they'd see DraftKings partner with Twitch after Twitch has now banned these big unregulated, crypto casinos or gambling that's unregulated. I think some people would look at that saying gambling's still gambling and still have, vices or negative things to say about both sides.
No, I mean, and as I will tell you, my thinking on this is they're all sorts of different forms. As I said, the lotto is a commonly used across the U.S., right? And that's a form of gambling, right? So there are lots of different forms. But for us, the decision was, the regulations are there for a reason in terms of protecting consumers. And our belief was that was a line where we were not trying to determine what was right or not. We were kind of leveraging other bodies making that determination.
Dan, do you think some streamers get banned on purpose?
When you say banned on purpose?
You
mean attacked on purpose? But I'm saying on purpose from who?
Do you think streamers get banned on purpose to come back from vacation with more viewers?
Oh, meaning now I understand what you're saying. That streamers want to get banned, right? Meaning that they do something specifically to get banned.
Yes.
Okay, so that then they can go on vacation, right, or whatever, and then when they come back. That's a great question, Jake, and I think you know the answer better than me.
Okay, cool.
So I'd love to hear your view on that, but I don't.
We're not here for me, Dan. I think everyone knows. I was just curious your take on this.
Yeah.
A long time ago, and I don't know if you guys have talked since, but a long time ago when you first took up the CEO roles, it was Jake and Bake, who is a very well-known streamer. He went viral for some discussion around you, and I think the quote-unquote was he called you out of touch as you took the CEO roles at Twitch. Have you guys talked since then? What was your reaction when you see those I have to imagine when you talk to someone and all of a sudden they're saying those things, it's probably not the best feeling. Can you take me through that?
Yeah, I have talked to Jake. He was at a partner thing we had, and because it's funny, his partner manager afterwards came up to me and said, Dan, Jake wants to know if you're mad about this. And I said, it's fine. And went up. We didn't talk about that. We just talked in general. I went up and chatted with him. In fact, we were talking about, I've been talking to him when he gets back in the States, maybe in July or August. I do a lot of whitewater kayaking. And I suggested I would, try to take him out so he can live stream while we whitewater kayaked. I've been trying to figure out the technical. In fact, I've been talking to IRL, unlimited IRL, to try to figure out technically how we do it, because the backpacks all have cords, and if you're going to be whitewater kayaking, you can't have something with a cord because the camera will be on your head. And so I'm hoping I get to do that with Jake. Of course, as he says that, of course it's disappointing. We had a brief conversation. I think that was, I think he talked to me when we were doing a roundtable. There's a roundtable, lots of different people asking questions. Relationships take time. That was the first time he had met me. Again, it was part of a bigger group. People form opinions quickly. And then, of course, when there's a snippet, it can spread, broadly. So all of us have had, people say things about them. And my job is to just keep out there. And I've been meeting tons of streamers. I feel good about so many of the streamers I've met. I've been both going around to different parts of the country and then bringing them on my stream. Jake and I have talked. We didn't talk about that in particular. I think he would have been uncomfortable doing. So we just kind of joked and talked about what he was doing. And hopefully you'll see us on stream together, whitewater kayaking sometime this summer.
Do you still think, or did you ever think you were out of touch, or do you think you're out of touch now? Have you out throughout this process the last few months begun to be more in touch with the community? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that I've always felt like one of my strengths is actually to listen and empathize. It doesn't mean that when we're trying to explain something, someone might respond in a particular way, especially if you're talking about revenue share or other things. It's easy when somebody feels strongly about an issue to feel that, okay? I actually don't feel that's true. I feel actually quite good about being in touch. I think I'm even more so than I had been before. But I think even before, I had fairly strong sense of the challenges our creators face, but I have an even stronger sense now. So I guess the answer is I didn't feel it was really a full characterization. In fact, if someone had talked to a bunch of people I talked to at TwitchCon, I think you would have heard many different views, and a lot of people very positive about the interaction. And I do feel like now I'm continuing to spend more time streaming myself helps a lot. Having small streamers come up on my channel, all that, you keep understanding the challenges. So I feel pretty good that I'm spending time and doing the right thing to kind of understand the challenges our streamers face.
I think one of the biggest offerings, we talked earlier about the incentives of streaming on Twitch and why it still maintains, at least I think by a lot of eyes, the top, if not obviously one of the top streaming platforms out there. One of those biggest incentives to me personally, outside looking in, has been the Twitch Prime sub. Is it possible the Twitch Prime sub cease to exist sometime in the future? Is that always going to be a thing here on Twitch?
So Prime is a key part of one of the big, I think you said it well. Prime is one of the big advantages Twitch has. When people subscribe via Prime, in general, those subscriptions are not people that would have subscribed if not for Prime. In general, we have lots of data to look at that. These are people that wouldn't either be able to subscribe or wouldn't subscribe. So I think that's a significant amount of money that goes into the creator ecosystem. We don't run Prime. Prime is another part of Amazon, but I can tell you that we work with them, and we've worked hard to make sure that the Prime sub drives value to them, and it's really important for our creators. So it's something that I care a lot about, and feel like it's essential that we keep that as a component of our offering because it drives a lot of value to our creators.
A big discussion recently too has been AWS. These big old servers to run these streams, it's an expensive feat for plenty of companies, including Twitch. How much does it cost, if you can go into any details, to host a streamer on Twitch?
Yeah.
If you can take a middle of the road streamer, if you can go into any of these details, because I think the general public either has misconceptions or it just has no knowledge whatsoever about the expenses that Twitch or Amazon has to bear when it comes to hosting all these streamers.
Yeah. So I don't know, going through a scenario of this streamer costs this and all that. To be honest, I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I probably wouldn't go through it. There's so many variables in hosting it, and each streamer is in a different. There's both the upload and the transcoding, which has its own cost, and then the egress in terms of the streaming. So it varies a lot. For different size streamers. So, to be honest, in terms of breaking it down, I understand is at the macro level in terms of how much we spend. But off the top of my head, I don't know the detailed numbers. I probably wouldn't go through them anyway because it is expensive. But for our streamers, that's sort of our business. In fact, I think when we did that post at some point talking about it, that's our job to worry about that. It's not our streamer's job to worry about that. And I think ultimately one thing is clear is they're like, okay, you guys do your job and help us do our job.
Do you think that Kick makes Twitch money?
Meaning in which way?
I think people relate that to AWS.
Oh, okay. So does it make, first of all, it's part of AWS. So the simple answer is it doesn't make Twitch money because AWS is not part of Twitch. For those that don't understand, our what we call IVS, Internet Video Service, is a service of AWS. It was built off of Twitch, and Kick is using them right now. This was very knowledgeable. AWS does this. They generalize things and lets other people use them, and we're very aware that this could happen, and we're fine with that because ultimately that is the best way to compete, and that's how AWS works in all lines of business.
Let's run it back, Dan. Let's have a fun one, all right? You've been with Twitch, I think maybe a lot longer than people actually would think with just the CEO role. So you've been around the space for several years now. In your own personal opinion, and I know you can't stretch it back to maybe just in TV, right? But from what you know, public knowledge-wise, what do you think has been the biggest streaming achievement on Twitch?
Oh, wow. Wow. So if I have by biggest streaming
I know
achievement.
it's a broad question.
Yeah. So so there are many different ways that you can answer that. Okay. And so I'm not going to pick any one achievement from our streamers because I can't pick one streamer and one of their achievements. That's just not fair for me. My kids, when they were growing up, they always joke around to try and figure out which one of them I love more, right? And they would always try to game me to jokingly say, well, really, my son would say, really, you love me more than, and I was like, no, I never fell for that one, okay? So I'm not going to pick, but I will say in terms of an achievement for the platform, okay? I think the gift subs was a huge achievement and was a meaningful shift because I think gift subs, of course, a big part of Twitch's subscriptions is patronage, right? And the viewers want to support the streamers. But the gift subs just work because it's not just about patronizing and supporting the streamer, but you're giving to the community. And that was a huge invention in that if you look at Twitch today and how much gift subs drives the economy of Twitch, I think it was hugely impactful.
I think that was a pretty solid answer. I want to open it up though, because I know there's other people maybe watch partying. I know we got emote only, but other streams are watching too. I wanted to open up to the public of what do you guys think is the single biggest streamer achievement?
Love to hear that.
Ever on Twitch? I'll rattle off, and maybe I'm naive. I don't go all the way back to Just the TV days, but just top of mind right now, and I'm sure I'm missing some things. But you think about the big subathons. You think about Ludwig's. You think about Kai's. I think about Ninja's peak throughout Fortnite. At least for me, I think Ninja has to probably.
I think. Well, part of it. The tricky thing is whenever you talk about these things, is all of it's in context. I think your point about Ninja being number one is part of it. Is it was still so that's when it kind of exploded. Where Twitch, if you went before that, nobody like Twitch. Yeah. What the heck is Twitch, right? And it transformed to now, Twitch is, commonplace. One of the things, you asked me about becoming CEO. I know I'm going to diverge for a second here, but jokingly, my kids really enjoyed it when I became CEO because then they didn't have to explain what my job was. Because they would say to their friends, what does your dad do? And they go, oh, he's president of Twitch. And they go, huh, what? and then my son would say he's CEO of Twitch. And now his friends are like, oh, man, cool. Like, so my son jumped up in cool factor because it's so commonplace now. So it's interesting. I think Kai's is neat because, of course, in terms of diversity and in terms of having a person of color that's reaching such a huge goal, I think that's, exciting. So what other ones have popped up there on your list?
I don't know if I can't only open so many chats. I think people said like Booga with the Fortnite World Cup, but that kind of coincides with Ninja. Fortnite was obviously a huge.
Booga was a little after It was a little after. I mean, it was kind of amazing that in fact Booga did it was shortly. I started shortly after Booga won the Fortnite World Cup, I think. But yeah, it was like the Ninja thing was really, it just, with Fortnite, it just skyrocketed up.
Yeah, I think Booga kind of coincides with that a bit after Ninja, but it's also, Booga's a bit younger, so he made national news too, because as a teenager, a $3 million World Cup, that dude has, gone on to do very well for himself.
I will tell you, one of the things that is so fun about this role is the diversity of streamers. You talk about Booga, who's just so different, right? And this kid, and then you talk about the Minecraft crew, right? And like Tubbo and what Amesy was someone who I just saw last night. And then you see the, Nick, and there's so many different personalities, right? It is just staggering the number of personalities all the way from these kids that are like, wow, right? To these, it's really wonderful to see like the different people out there.
Yeah, I got two more questions for you, but I would love if you still have time to maybe open it up. I know we have some requests. Not sure if you have time, but regardless, I got two more for you. People are wanting to know, does Twitch have any big streamer announcements coming, or is Twitch stepping away from these big streamer contracts?
So first of all, even as we did contracts, we would never announce them. So just to be clear, that we might have done them, but we would not announce them. We didn't think that was beneficial. I will say that in general, for the health of the ecosystem, a big part of our approach now is to think broadly about the whole ecosystem. And the big streamers are critical to our platform. They drive a great deal of value to our platform. But the torso, and you see this when we do Partner Plus, right? The bread and butter of Twitch are all those creators and all those affiliates that show up every day in their small communities. And I'm very aware of how important that is to Twitch. Because anyone who watches Twitch, they may sit there and enjoy watching Hassan. They may watch Pokey. They may watch Miz. But they also watch 5 or 6 smaller channels, right? And that really matters to them in their experience, because there's something special about the smaller channels. When you're in one of the bigger channels, it's like a stadium, and it's like, whoa, all this stuff is happening. But then you're in a smaller channel, and that's where the community happens, because you see this person, the phrase I use, and I'm going to date myself a little here. Some people remember this. There's a TV show, Cheers, which probably most people know of that, but there's a phrase from the comedy Cheers, a bar where everybody knows your name. And that was a phrase that was talking about where you go into this bar and everyone knows your name. And part of what all these small communities are is someone might be a member of 5 or 6 or 7 communities, and you go in and you haven't been there for a little while, right? And they say, DJ Clancy, where you been? Right? The streamer celebrates you. There's something about walking into a room and feeling like you're in that bar where everybody knows your name. And it's not just one bar. I think we as humans, that's what we yearn for, right? Is this sense of belonging. And that doesn't happen just on it happens on all the channels. So I think it's critical for us to be thinking about all these big, small, and medium creators.
I like the way that you are media trained, but I still like the answer you gave. So I'll take that. My last one for you.
And it's not training, it just comes natural.
Oh, okay. All right. Here we go. Last one for you. We've seen rumors as of now, the CDL might be transitioning for a deal to YouTube. I know these broadcast rights have been back and forth for many years now. We've seen rumors that maybe Kick wants to get some esports rights or broadcast rights. Are esports still a priority here on Twitch?
Yeah, that's another one of these spaces where, yes, esports are a priority. Esports is an important part of how Twitch grew. Obviously, lots of people enjoy esports a lot, whether it's on Twitch or other platforms. My son is a big Overwatch player, and so he's always feeling bad because he likes watching Overwatch League and says, Dad, I'm going to watch Overwatch League on YouTube. And part of it is I do think we went through a period where you got into bidding wars, and it wasn't good for the esports ecosystem or for us, because the reality was you created these artificial bidding wars that wasn't profitable for the esports publishers, companies, or us. So esports are very important to us. I think for all of us, the right thing is to find a way to make esports so it keeps growing and keeps sustaining, as opposed to creating unsustainable approaches.
Awesome.